Django 6 is here. Well, it's not here. It's out. It's not released into, main or anything yet. But you can start playing with it as of now. We're looking at looks like a December 2025 for this to actually be in in production, let's call it. Um, so I wanted to point out a few things I'm excited about in it. I played around a bit, and I'm going to be talking about a few different topics that are all interesting and cool. Yeah, let's just get into it. So I'm on the release notes for it right now. This will, be updated and changed as more things are patched and more things happen. But it's a lot of things in it. There's actually quite a lot, but I'm going to be talking about I think some of the bigger things, as well as the ones that are interesting to me, and things that I actually use. So we'll just start off. Importantly, that we're using Python 3.12 and 3.13 now. So 3.10, 3.11, which worked in 5.x is basically dropped now. That's all good. That's all good with me because I like to use the bleeding edge. So yeah, the content security policy support. This was a package that normally you would install, like pip install CSP something, and it essentially is to do a lot of like security stuff, like embedding stuff in iframes and images that can be injected and scripts and stuff like that. I've had to use it in certain cases, and it's just nice, I think, that it is now part of Django core, and we're gonna dig into that. In fact, let's take a look at that now. So I have, just to kind of save time, I have a pretty basic Django project set up. Nothing new in this. The only thing new is the fact that it's my requirements.txt. I'm using Django 6.0 A1, so Alpha 1, I imagine that would stand for. And then I've just, kind of created a content app with, a template that's just, Django 6 tutorial. I'll show you what it looks like. Super fancy. Here we are. Boom. I just kind of want to have some stuff in place so that I'm not, creating files and wasting everyone's time when, you're probably familiar with how to do that. So yeah, let's start by creating a script here. So I'm just going to create a script that does something like document.write, hello world. And we'll save that and we'll see, it works. And that's all good, as you would expect. It's just writing this. This is just having a JavaScript. Cool. But let's actually add the CSP package and see what it can kind of prevent and how we can, work with it. So the first thing we want to do is in our settings, and because it's just pretty vanilla Django, I just have all my settings, as they come. But we're going to throw some settings down here. And well, firstly, I'm going to import the CSP package, and I'm just going to import it here just so that everything's kind of tight and together. And we're going to throw in this, which this is just copying and pasted right from this right here with a couple of notes that I've made. We have this. So this is configuring, saying the default source has to be like self, like the application that's doing it. Script sources, we're gonna have this thing called nonce. I'm not gonna be super like this is exactly what all the things do. I'm gonna kind of just like show how to do this stuff. And then there's something for style source too. So these are just kind of like ways to have protection so people can't modify scripts. Now doing this on its own is not enough. We need to also add to our middleware something. So inside our middleware, we're gonna add a new one. And we'll just add it right at the bottom. I know sometimes order of middleware matters, but in this case, it is totally fine there. I haven't tested anywhere else. And if we do this now, let's just view our thing. We're seeing now that script is not executing. We're actually getting a content security policy because we've essentially put headers, like the CSV packages put headers being like, hey, we can't just have inline scripts without, something special. And that special thing is what, or one way to handle it is to create a nonce. And a nonce is basically a way that in a header, in the headers, when you request the page, you get that sort of like random cryptography string of a value that that's in the header, and then we also are going to need to inject the same one into the script tag itself. And basically, browsers just know to look if that header's thing in the header doesn't match this, like it looks like someone's doing something malicious, like we're not going to let that script execute. So this is just one example of many. But yeah, in order to add this, we are going to go to our content processors, and we're going to add one more. Right here, and it's just Django template context processes.csp. This basically gives access to our Django templating system to have some extra fancy, functionality. So we're going to go back to our home.html, and what we can do here now is add a something for nonce. So if I was to run this right now, it still wouldn't work, but I can go nonce equals and then basically put in this magic thing called CSP nonce. So I'm going to put that, and let's see if everything's good. And look, now our code is executing. And the reason that's happening is if we view the source here, we actually see there's this random nonce, this string here that's being generated, which this exact same string, under the hood, the CSP package, I don't know if that's the right word anymore, but the CSP functionality is both creating this nonce randomly on every request, putting it in the header, and also injecting it into the script. And the browser just knows, make sure those things match. So that's CSP real quick. Yeah, nothing really new there. If you've used CSP before, that's just scratching the surface, but it's built into Django now as opposed to something I have to install with pip. And that's one less dependency to worry about. The next thing I wanted to cover, is background tasks. So background tasks are a big topic. Generally, I use something like Celery, and I use Redis as my broker. I've used other brokers before. And essentially, the concept is, you're doing a task that you don't want the request to be held up just to, process something that maybe takes longer. Like, let's say sending an email is always a good example, but maybe you're, processing some AI, prompt or something like that. And you don't necessarily want your API call to be waiting for that to complete, because usually there's a max of like 30 seconds on a lot of servers for an API call. It's better to just send that off to a background worker, have something else deal with it. Celery is a good, good for that. But there is, especially on a simple Django project, it's a bit of effort to set all that stuff up. And Django is showing like, hey, we're working on a solution to, have this as part of the core. And it's pretty easy to use. Now, this is not this thing, and hopefully this is something that's fleshed out a little bit more by December, or when this is meant to come out, because right now there's only 2 different backend options, which you'll see in a bit, and they're useful for development. They're useful for being like, I'm going to migrate and start using this, but they don't work yet, and I'll explain why when we see it. But the API is great, and it's just way easier than setting up and having to launch like a Celery worker or whatever. It's all just running in in the single like Django dev server, if that's how we're doing it, which is how we're doing it right now. So yeah, let's figure out this. So I'm going to create a task. I already have the file here, and we're just going to make a very simple task, which is going to be to just send emails to a user, which again is a pretty common thing. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go from Django.core.mail. We're going to just import the send mail. Okay, nothing new there, or is there? We'll see in a bit. Stay till the end. From Django.tasks, import tasks. Now it's weird. I don't get the like normal IntelliSense that I would here, and I'm not sure why, because I have my virtual environment pointed in VS Code, but it doesn't matter. This will work. So task is a decorator. So now we can just decorate it with task, which if you use Celery and stuff, you might have like app.task a lot of the time, or something similar. But yeah, we just do .task here, and then we create a normal function. So let's do like email users. And we're going to accept a list of emails, a subject, and a body, and or let's call it message. And then in this case, we're just going to use the built-in send mail that we imported here from Django, essentially passing that stuff through. So nothing new there, just send mail. We're going to pass those through, and everything's great. Okay, so cool, we have that. Now we do have to do a little bit more here. We need to go to our settings. So we're going to go to our settings here, and we're going to add a whole new thing called a whole new section, namespace, variable, whatever you want to call it, called tasks. And inside task, we need to do some various settings here. So we'll just, it's kind of like setting up like, database or storage or whatever, but there's a default, and we'll just set that. And the one parameter we need, although I imagine there's others, I haven't played with them, is Django.tasks.backends. Let's start with the, there's two different backends, as I said, and I'm going to copy this in because I will probably mistype it, but we're going to try the ImmediateBackend. So the intention with this backend is, hey, these are actually going to execute immediately, but it's going to use all the same flow and APIs and conventions. So you could, use this, in development to make sure like everything's good. And then when a proper backend is rolled out, or you, I imagine, could build your own, all your implementation of it, should remain unchanged. So we're going to use this. And then in order to test this out, rather than putting this in like my views.py and reloading the page, I'm going to make a management command to run this. So I've already created the file. It doesn't do anything yet because that's what we're going to make right now. So to actually, execute this, we want to import our email users. So I'm just going to start typing that, email users, and do my auto import here. Yep, from content.tasks, import users. And what we do now is we type .in queue. Is that how you spell it? That looks right. And then here we pass the parameters. So if we actually open this up here, we can see, okay, we need to pass email, subject, and message. I'm not 100% sure. You might be able to do positional arguments, but in the documentation, they do it with named arguments. So you could try the other way, you could try it, but I like this because actually something that's kind of, annoying with sometimes working with Celery is, at least from what I understand, like you kind of have to do everything as just positional arguments passed into an array called args. Like you basically go args equals this and then do the things, which can be like, doesn't feel like great. So this is kind of nice. It's just, calling the function, but you're kind of, because of the task decorator here, it's adding these, things onto this function here, so we can enqueue it. So I don't think I missed anything. So I'm going to stop my server because we're just going to be running this as a command. So I'm just going to do Python manage.py and do send emails. That's just how we run this command because that's the file name. And okay, it should just be send email. There we go. So I got an error, and I was expecting an error because I haven't actually set this project up with like an SMTP server or whatever. But the fact is, you saw it just execute immediately in the same thread, which is, how this is supposed to go, how this backend is supposed to work. Because again, it's just like, hey, start migrating your code as if you want to use this, or when you're writing new stuff, you can do it. But instead of it running in the background, it's just going to run normally. But then when you, are ready, you can add a new backend. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to choose a different backend. So instead of immediate.backend, we're going to use I think it's called DummyBackend. Let's save. And in this case, we'll run that command again, and we don't get anything back. We don't get any errors because what the dummy backend does is it allows us to like inspect what's added to the queue and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't actually execute it. And we can, inspect what's happening here. Like for instance, and I'll just, go like this and print this out. So we're just going to do a write, and we do need to import something here. So from Django.tasks, import default task backend. So what we can do at any point in our debugging or whatever is actually, look at how many results are in the queue kind of thing. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm importing this, and we're just basically going, hey, yeah, show me the results, or how many, the length of the results. So in this case, we see total results 1. So this was actually added to the queue, although not executed because it's a dummy backend, but it's, it's working. And of course, we could do like, for result in default back test, whatever, dot results, we could just like print out the result, right? Instead of just like a count. And we can kind of see this, pickle of information here of, what the arguments were, for instance, all that kind of stuff. So kind of cool. I imagine, what we'll ship with this is probably like us, something similar Celery, or even Celery itself. Actually, I haven't given this a ton of thought. I imagine there'll be like a database broker as well, which I know some, frameworks use. And, instead of storing them on something like Redis, they're storing it on, Celery. There might be like a RabbitMQ or CloudMQ or any of those kind of things. But it's cool. I'm happy that this is being taken, into core, because it's always such a, it can be such a hassle. Although it works, like nothing wrong with Celery. I will still continue to use Celery, I'm sure, because a lot of my stuff relies on it. But this is, this to me, I think is probably one of the more exciting features that's coming out in Django 6. The next one, which, actually, like, especially me now, because I'm kind of coming back to doing a lot more like full stack Django stuff, just because I'm really loving not thinking about APIs and just having, with like Tailwind and stuff, having all your client and server stuff all, commingling. This next feature is actually something I'm definitely going to be using once I can. I can't do it now because I don't want to use Django 6 in production, but this is called partials, template partials. So this allows us to essentially have reusable, HTML components kind of within our file to render things in I think, a more elegant way than doing like the normal, like the current version of, I guess, the equivalent of partials, which, is kind of like doing the include sort of thing and then having to pass all the parameters through that, you want that to have. It's a bit more elegant. So this one, yeah, we shouldn't need to do any backend code. It's just, the template stuff. So let's talk this through. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to create what's called a partial def. And I believe you can do this anywhere in your file. And I imagine there's probably a way to put that in other files too, but I haven't explored that far because I haven't actually, use this. That's usually when I learn, is when I'm actually building something with it. So we're going to create a partial def just called user info. And like we can imagine, we're going to have a page here that's going to list a lot of users, and you'll see why the partial is better than just having it in a loop like you would maybe traditionally do. And of course, like Django templating language, we just have an end of this definition. So in here, we'll just make very simple HTML. It's just going to be, a div. It's going to be, actually, I don't even care about the ID. Let's make this really basic. We're just going to have like the username and the bio. Okay, cool. And that's our partial def. Then if we wanted to actually reuse this in multiple points, we could, of course, like loop through some data. So in order to do this, there will be a little bit of back-end work because we need to actually go to our homepage view and create some fake users, essentially. Now, what I want to illustrate is you might have users, and we're going to just use like the idea of books. You might have users that are authors, editors, readers, all that kind of stuff, but they're all the same, model under the hood, and we want to, present them the same way, essentially. So let me just put in this dummy data that I made right here. And yeah, it's just a list of authors with like a username and a bio, and then editors, and then basically the context we're going to pass to the template will have both the key of authors and editors. So these are the same kind of data shape, but obviously different sort of stuff. And we'll get black to save that and make it look even nicer for us. Okay, so to actually use this now, what we can do is we can do something like, and I'll just not worry about the script, but we can do a for loop like we normally would for user in editors, or sorry, let's start with authors. And then we need to make sure we end that for loop, of course. And then all we have to do in here is actually implement the partial, and we just go partial user-info. So we'll save that, and assuming there's no typos, when we go back, we should, there were no typo, well, there might be a typo, but we need to get our server running again, of course. Run server. See, so now we have like, Jane Doe, Mike Smith, Sarah Johnson. Now in this case, like, there's not really like, if this was all we were doing, we might as well just, have this right inside here. It'll essentially do the same thing, right? But what's cool is we can also then, maybe later in our UI, after like an HR, if we want to get real fancy, we can also loop through our editors, and, we get that same sort of thing, but it's, we wouldn't have to like, duplicate this code, and have like this twice. So now we only have to change it in one spot, one source of truth. And if you know me, I love that kind of stuff. It's really nice. Now there's a lot more power here, but I think for the context of this video, I just wanted to, show it in its basic form. Definitely, check out the release notes and, let me know in the comments if there's really, really cool things you've found out about it. So those are the three main things I want to cover. I did want to mention one other fun factoid that's actually pretty useful that hasn't existed until this. But for loops now, you can get the length of them in your template to do logic or to print it out or whatever. So I can do just forloop.length. There's other like things like this, like forloop.isFirst or index or something like this. But this will get the length of the whole for loop, which I'm just going to print it out like this. And oh, what do we have? For loop. I did something wrong. Oh yes, it's not a percent sign. It's just a double braces basically. And we'll save that. And we'll see now it's going to be after all of them in this one, like we'll see 2, 2, that kind of thing, right? So it's telling me the length of that loop, which, for certain things might be, might be useful. So I wanted to point that out. And I did want to also mention that something that is not going to necessarily affect you unless you're doing, unless there's like some weird stuff that's annoying you. But essentially, Django for the longest and still is using for emails under the hood. So not as like a developer that's implementing, for instance, the send mail Django send mail function, but deeper under the hood, they're relying on something called compat32. It was legacy even when Django started to implement it, and it has issues with like Unicode characters and MIME types and all these sorts of things. And what they've migrated it to is using basically the Python has one since 3.6, I think. That's just a better, more high level API, better to work with, handles Unicode better, all that kind of stuff. So although not something you're going to like necessarily play around with, if you're having some weird Unicode issues, you might see that they're gone in, Django 6. In December, hopefully. So yeah, that's what I wanted to cover. I hope you found this content, interesting. I want to just call it the things at least that interest me and the things that I use, daily or roughly daily in Django. So yeah, definitely like and subscribe. Write a comment. Tell me if I missed anything cool if you go through the release notes, because there's other stuff in there too. There's, a lot of like updates to, some stuff about Postgres and various other things. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.